What is happening, everybody? Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock. Do us favors you're watching, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and yeah, right before we were starting here, Matt and I were just discussing some of the crazy pitcher injuries, which one of which really impacted yesterday's slate because Spencer Strider was really popular. I liked him. Matt liked him. He pitched poorly, but it wasn't just that he pitched poorly. Like there was something that was off with Strider. He couldn't throw sliders. He was just kind of yanking them, and they were going a lot of them into the dirt. So hitters are starting to realize, like, hey, he just can't throw his slider for strikes. Then his fastball, he was throwing some fastballs like 94 miles per hour. For a lot of people, 94 miles per hour is, pretty decent fastball, but not for Spencer Strider. So I'm watching that start. I didn't really think injury, but Matt, I was watching them thinking, boys, this just isn't Strider's day. Something's off with them. And then you go find out after the game that elbow soreness. He's going to be dealing with an injury. It looks like it could potentially be serious. We just found out that Shane Bieber's going to have elbow surgery. What do you make of all these pitcher injuries early in the year? Because this is crazy.
It can't be a good thing for the pitch clock and how they've tried to really speed the game up. From a Cleveland fan side of it, it feels so much like Deshaun Watson, who was coming off the best half of football he had ever. Coming. Who like he had ever coming off the best half of football he had ever played as a Brown. In the second half against Baltimore, we won that game. And then out of nowhere, the next Monday, he's out for the year. Feels similar just because, like, Bieber was really good. Like, the Strider thing, yeah, sucks, and it's awful. And like you said, you were watching him yesterday. At least, like, he wasn't great yesterday. Bieber has been dominant, so it's like, damn. Hopefully he gets better and, he's in Cleveland long term because he's a free agent after this year. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I only saw that he's having elbow surgery. Did they specify what the surgery is? Because elbow surgery can mean so many different things. It can mean he has a bone spur in his elbow and they just have to shave it down, which could often be a short-term absence. It could be anything from that to, Tommy John surgery. Like it was very broad statement, just like, hey, Shane Bieber totally out of left field.
I saw Tommy John.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that means he's probably out next year as well.
Probably.
That's insane. Absolutely insane. What do you attribute these injuries to? Do you think it's the pitch clock? Because I have seen two different arguments being made online. I think there's merit to both of them. A lot of pitchers are attributing it to the pitch clock. Also, we do know that there's been a lot of efforts made to constantly increase the spin rate and the velocity of pitchers. Is it just beyond what pitchers could physically handle? We're not doctors. We're not scientists around here. I know every once in a while we might see somebody in the YouTube chat. You'd be like, boy, that guy's making some good points. I bet he's a smart scientist. But for us, we're no experts in the medical field. But if you had to wager your best guess, what do you think it is that's leading to these increased injuries?
So the first thing that comes to mind, and I've heard players say this forever, like the human arm was not naturally supposed to throw the ball 95 or whatever miles per hour. So just doing that in itself is going to create injury problems. But as you're talking about now, we're seeing kind of an uppage in injury problems recently. And I don't know, but for me, it seems like how could the pitch clock not have something to do with it? Again, I don't know, and maybe I'm completely off there. That's the first thing that comes to mind. So do you have a similar take or something off the board?
So I have one other thing that this was a talking point at one point, but kind of went away. So Jeremy Hoffman in chat said, former pitcher, the spin rate and gripping the ball harder. I do wonder how much of this is, well, number one, it could be multiple factors. It could be the pitch clock. It could be the increased velocity. But also, remember that not all that long ago, pitchers were allowed to use sticky substances. Not that it was allowed. It was against the rules. But it wasn't something that was really being enforced. And to me, where the injuries really started, it wasn't with the pitch clock. The increase in velocity has been going on for a little bit, but it's actually when pitchers had to start changing the grips on their pitches because they weren't allowed to use the sticky substances to get a better grip anymore. It could, I think the most likely scenario, it's a little bit from all of these.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed.
I do think part of this is kind of being forgotten about. The pitchers now have to change their grips. A lot of pitchers had to change their pitch mixes specifically because they weren't able to get the same sort of grips on the balls. Like we saw Tyler Glasnow had Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago, and he said that it was specifically due to the fact that once MLB came down and said no more sticky stubbins, it just on the fly in the middle of the season, he has to change his grips on a bunch of pitches. He had to change his arm angle for some of his pitches. And then he said he got hurt shortly after. That's always something that's resonated in my head and be like, well, I could really understand logically how when a pitcher all of a sudden has to change their grips and then also their arm angles on pitches because they can't get the same grip they were before, that could also lead to injuries.
Yeah, good call. Didn't really think about that. I think you're right in that it's probably a little bit of everything and stuff we're not even thinking about. But yeah, it's hard not to speculate on this stuff because, man, pitchers going down sucks.
Yeah. And now, I mean, we're starting to look at some of these slates like today, for instance, not that there was going to be the greatest pitchers in the world going today if there were no injuries involved, but the pitching options, not the most enticing. We don't have the Spencer Striders on the slate today, not meaning the Spencer Strider showed up yesterday, meaning the general Spencer Strider is in the actual aces on the slate. And then also you look at the current situation of the Cy Young odds and you kind of start to go like, boy, these are the guys who are favored to win Cy Young now. It's like you look at the National League Cy Young odds now, and it's Zach Wheeler 1, and then it's Freddie Peralta and Zach Gallen tied at 2. You got Tyler Glasnow 3. I don't even think Glasnow has ever thrown more than like 120 innings in an entire career, in an entire season in his career. So yeah, these injuries are having a pretty big impact, but just something I wanted to talk about there. At the top, we are sponsored here by Sleeper. If you guys want to sign up at Sleeper, sign up using the link that we have below. You're going to get a deposit bonus of up to $500 when you sign up. And also there's going to be a welcome offer free square. So pretty regularly over at Sleeper, they offer a bunch of free squares. So go check it out because when you can get stuff like LeBron James over 0.5 points, probably something you want to be taking advantage of. And yeah, somebody else in chat also bringing up, somebody's saying that Garrett Cole should be the favorite to win the Cy Young. No, he's injured as well. He's one of the many players that is injured.
You know who I think is worth a long shot Cy Young play? And I'm not like a futures player like you are, but one guy stands out to me looking at this as we're talking about it. Blake Snell is like middle of the pack in the NL. He's coming back next week, and he's the reigning NL Cy Young Award winner. Same division. Like, I know that he was kind of a atypical Cy Young Award winner, and that a lot of his, he had problems putting runners on base and he didn't go very deep into games. But we're talking about guys getting hurt. He is the reigning Cy Young Award winner, and he's not anywhere close to the top of the list. So just calling that out.
Yeah, the other one I'll add too is if it doesn't seem like it's going to be the case, but if we get word that Spencer Strider's MRI checks out and there's no issues with him, his odds have dropped. So Strider was plus 350 going into yesterday. And then he gets hurt. He's getting the MRI done. His odds have dropped to 14-1. I do expect that MRI to reveal bad news, but if it doesn't, I mean, you get Spencer Strider now at 14-1 to win Cy Young based on what might actually just end up being one bad start. Don't bet him now. Wait for news, but just another angle to consider there with Strider. But yeah, Blake Snell 18-1, Strider 14-1. So we'll end up seeing what happens with some of that news there on Spencer Strider. But let's talk about today's slate, Matt, where we don't have the normal sort of top end aces. Like we mentioned, there are 2 pitchers priced above 9K. We've got Yamamoto, who has been inconsistent to start the year. He had one very terrible start to open up his MLB season, pitching over in Korea, which was, kind of a weird circumstance. We talked about it before, how the season started between that Dodgers and Padres over in Korea. They played a 2-game series in the middle of the night. Joe Ryan is $9,200 against Cleveland. What do you make of these 2 pitchers that are priced over 9K? Do you have interest in either of them? The way that the field is looking at it, Yamamoto 11% owned, and we got 25% ownership going to Joe Ryan.
I have interest in both of them, to be quite honest. I don't love them. I like them. But that's how I feel about basically every pitcher on the slate. I think I'm not forcing them in and forcing my hand to go with like a cheap offense. There's a couple other pitchers I like. But I do like both these guys. Ryan specifically, it's not a great matchup, but he's one of, if not the best pitcher on the slate. He was good in his season debut. Maybe I should be a little more scared of this matchup than I've been. Pablo Lopez destroyed me the other day. Cleveland, not only do they not strike out, they've been good to start the year. I still like Ryan here. Maybe I'm too high on him. And then Yamamoto. Again, I think it's a risky spot. The Cubs obviously proved it yesterday. Still great pitching weather in Chicago. His strikeout upside is really high in any spot. So with salary, not a huge concern for me. I do like both these guys, but they're by no means must plays at all. I mean, Yamamoto doesn't even look great in the tools. He's just not getting much ownership.
Yeah, he's very difficult to project because we've got 2 big league starts, and you got his Japanese stats are tremendous. He was one of the best, well, actually the best pitcher overseas, which is why not only when he got signed by the Dodgers did he get signed to a big contract. I don't remember the terms of it off the top of my head, but he immediately became not only the favorite to win the Rookie of the Year award, but he also came into the year with like the 3rd best NL Cy Young odds. And he got off to that rough start in his first outing, but he bounced back, looked better in his last start. Overall, his numbers, we've only seen him pitch 6 innings. He has a 7.5 ERA. The underlying numbers are much better, though, but still small sample size. 3.2 expected ERA, 1.85 FIP. He does have a 27% K rate to this point this year. The thing that has really hurt him, and once again, we're talking about a small sample size, he is a 353 BABIP. That is unsustainably high. And then a 37.5% strand rate. So ultimately what's happened to Yamamoto in these starts is that balls that are being put in play are turning into hits more often than they should. And then on top of that, nearly everybody that's getting on base that shouldn't be getting on base is then ending up scoring. So it's small sample size, but that's kind of the bad luck that Yamamoto has ran into. And I do think that if you're looking at all the pitchers on this slate, the upside of Yamamoto from a real life standpoint and where he is going to be at the end of the year is so much higher than anybody else here. It is not out of the realm of possibility that at the end of the season, we're looking back going, boy, Yamamoto is the best pitcher in baseball. I'm not saying that's the most likely scenario, but it's within the realm of outcomes. You're not going to be saying that about Joe Ryan or Jordan Wicks or Tyler Wells or any of these other guys on the slate. So from that standpoint, 11% ownership on Yamamoto, that's something I like being overweight to. It's very interesting low ownership where we've talked about all these uncertain scenarios early on in the season, Matt. And where I want to play a lot of them is if it's uncertain, but the field is going in a certain way, I'll go the other way, which is make me overweight to 11% owned Yamamoto on a smallish slate where there just aren't great pitching options and the field seems to be writing him off.
I feel the exact same way. You said it very eloquently. I'll piggyback off what you were talking about with him being very good in Japan. He was dominant. Like, this is a guy that's come over with a ton of pedigree. He was dominant in the World Baseball Classic. Like, he's been a pitcher that's been thought of very highly for a long time. So I'm all about it. And again, it's risky, but that's why the ownership's not there. And I like that a lot. All your points just added, followed up with exactly how I felt.
So now let's go and talk about the pitchers that are just a little bit cheaper here. Talked about the 2 pitchers in the 9K range. For the ownership, I prefer Yamamoto. If I was playing a cash game and I had to pay up for a pitcher, I would prefer Joe Ryan. But now with that said, I wouldn't be playing Yamamoto or Joe Ryan in cash games because of some of these pitchers that have really favorable matchups that are a little bit cheaper. But if we do look in the 8K range, we've got Trevor Rogers, Jordan Wicks, Tyler Wells, Ranger Suarez. We'll group these guys together. We'll talk about the 7K pitchers and Kenta Maeda after this. But if we look at these guys in the 8K range, here's where chalk is. Actually, screw it. Let's include Kenta Maeda in this because his ownership's the same as these guys. So 7,900 to 8,500. These pitchers grouped together. What's most notable, Tyler Wells, 32% on, Ranger Suarez, 32% on, Kenta Maeda, 31% on. These are your 3 most popular pitchers on the slate. I also do think if you're playing cash games on DraftKings, you want to pick 2 out of these 3 30% owned pitchers to go ahead and build your lineups around there. But anyway, of these chalk pitchers, Wells, Suarez, Maeda, who is your favorite of the 3? Very similarly owned.
My favorite's Maeda. I don't even think it's close, really. He's probably my favorite pitcher on the slate just because of the price point. I'm stubborn with Maeda. I liked him in his first start, and it's equally similar soft spot against the White Sox. It was like the one start the White Sox actually did well. So, yeah, a little bit concerned there, but not really. Maeda's a proven commodity. This matchup is just elite at home against the Tigers, or against the A's, excuse me. I like Maeda a ton here. The tools, like Suarez a little bit more, and I get that. He's a better strikeout pitcher. I feel similarly about both. Maeda getting slightly less ownership. So they look very similar to me. Those are my 2 favorites. Then probably Wells, another guy with high K upside, nice win equity here against Pittsburgh. But you're right. Ownership is basically the same on all these guys. So if you're looking for a contrarian pivot, it's Trevor Rogers. But I like the other guys significantly more on like a points per dollar perspective.
If I'm going to be contrarian, this is not the range I'm going to go to. It's either going
Same.
to be Yamamoto at the top, or I have a cheap pitcher that I'll be talking about in a little bit that I have some interest in. But as far as these guys go, I agree with you. Kenta Maeda is the guy that I feel the best about in this range, and it's for two reasons. First off, he's pitching at home. That's a positive. The other part, too, he's pitching against the Oakland A's. Another massive, massive positive. Ranger Suarez is on the road pitching against the Nationals. It's not a very difficult matchup, but still, pitching on the road is more difficult than pitching at home. It does influence how the umpires make some of the balls and strikes. Well, it's not going to matter once we get the robot umps in here getting the calls right. But in the interim, this is what we have to deal with. Kenta Maeda pitching at home, going up against Oakland. That is a much easier matchup than Tyler Wells on the road in Pittsburgh or Ranger Suarez on the road in Washington. So people in chat saying, well, what if Maeda is washed up? I mean, that could be the case, but I'm not going to say that just because he had one bad start this year. Because he's only pitched one start in 3 innings. I'm not looking at those 3 innings and saying like, this guy can't be any good. And the other side of it too is I'm very certain the Oakland A's offense is very no good, terrible. So I like the matchup for Kenta Maeda. He's pitching at home. There's a lot of strikeout equity in it. And as long as he is not totally washed as a pitcher, and he was good last year as well. I understand he's 36 years old now, but last year, he had one of the highest strikeout rates of his career. He was still able to maintain a strikeout rate in that mid 30% range. I mean, he struggled over 10 hitters per 9 innings a year ago, pitching against the Oakland A's today. So cheap price point as well. Maeda at $7,900. He is my favorite pitcher in this sort of range. Now, let's also talk about which guy we would exclude from a cash game now. Because if people are looking to build a cash game lineup, they have to use 2 out of these 3 starting pitchers. Which 2 would you choose? Or would you maybe go up to Joe Ryan?
I think in cash games, I would use Maeda and Suarez. I think it's really close with the Wells play also, but it's just a preference thing at that point. The ownership is so similar that, it's highly likely, or not highly likely, but it's just as possible that, Maeda comes in slightly higher owned than Wells or vice versa. So I don't really think you care too much about the ownership there. You play your preference between those 3 guys. Maeda and Suarez for me. How about you?
Yeah, I'm also going to go Maeda and Suarez. To your point, the ownership is similar. The prices are similar. I think these guys have the 2 easiest matchups. Oakland and Washington, I both consider to be worse offenses than the Pittsburgh Pirates. I don't think that's a controversial opinion. Most people in chat would likely be agreeing with that. But the other part of this, too, is our tools. If you look at the top 2 pitcher percentage, which is not wildly different across these pitchers, but still, if you're going to look at it from that standpoint, we do have Kenta Maeda and Ranger Suarez, each with higher percentages be top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate than does Tyler Wells. So all those things being considered, if you guys are playing a cash game, the pitchers I'm going to recommend you play, Ranger Suarez, Kenta Maeda, and that's going to give you a lot of flexibility to pay up for some of your bats in that lineup. If we go ahead and look at the cheaper pitching options, let's look at the guys 7,600 to 7,000. We will exclude the sub 7K punts for now. And in this price range, we've got Steven Matz, 7,600, project for 23% ownership. I don't know how we've gotten to a point in Steven Matz's career where he seems to always find a way to be popular. Like, it doesn't matter how bad he's been, how many years he's been bad for. It doesn't matter the injuries he's dealt with. People always find a way to roster him on slates, and I'm almost always more inclined to stack against Steven Matz than I am to go out and roster him myself.
Can you imagine Matz against the Mariners? How high owned he would be? It would break DraftKings.
I mean, it happens fairly regularly.
No, I'm saying Matz versus the Mariners.
Oh, Matz versus. Oh, I understand. Yeah, because I was forgetting about how the way that this is worked. Yes, Steven Matz would have to be like 115% owned, and then the Mariners. I would be the only one stacking the Mariners.
It was a bad joke, but you got it.
No, it was not a bad joke. I was just I was thinking about the stats for the slate, and just it was bad hosting on my part, because it was a callback, something I bring up on a lot of these shows here. Yeah, every pitcher is just crazy popular against the Seattle Mariners. We saw it again last night with Freddie Peralta, and he ended up not pitching all that well because Mariners offense doesn't suck. I haven't looked at the ownership yet for the late slate, but I assume there's some pitchers really popular against the Mariners yet again. That aside, Yeah, Steven Matz at his current ownership, like these options are not all that great on paper. So I actually do understand why people would prefer Steven Matz to these other options, just not at this ownership. I have no intention to play an over 20% on Steven Matz, who's cheap, but not like insanely cheap. I'd much rather spend up the few hundred extra dollars to get to Wells, Suarez, or Maeda.
Yeah, 100% with you. Like, not even a question for me.
Let me look to see in my Sims run. Yeah, I hardly got to any exposure to Matz here. So he's just not going to be for me on this slate. But is there a different pitcher in this price range, Matt, that you are gravitating towards? Because I have one, and I'm curious to see if you were on a similar guy or maybe somebody different.
I know who your guy is for sure. Nick
all right,
Martinez.
So let's do this first. Guess who my guy is?
Nick Martinez.
No, it is not Nick Martinez.
Really?
It is not.
Don't tell me it's Carlos Carrasco.
No. He's below the price. Eventually you're just gonna guess enough guys.
Okay. So who is it?
It's Severino. So there was a lot of you and I rostered Severino in his first start, and there was a lot of positives that came out of it. I know that people are just going to look at the fact that he gave up runs and be like, oh my God, that was a terrible outing for Severino. Severino pitched 5 innings. He had 6 strikeouts and 0 walks in those 5 innings. He got destroyed by BABIP. He had a 500 BABIP. The amount of infield singles that Luis Severino allowed in that game. And then also, here's something that we were kind of tilting in Discord. He should have had 3 less earned runs as well. In the first inning, there was a ground ball hit to the third baseman that just got botched. I think it was Zach Short who was playing third base that game. I'm fairly sure I'm remembering that correctly. And it was an error that just wasn't ruled an error. If that's ruled an error, then he doesn't get charged any of his earned runs in the first inning. And I do think that changes people's outlook on Severino. Now, it's still very risky rostering him. He was terrible last year, but I thought there was a lot of positives from that first start. He was generating a bunch of swing and misses. The velocity was there, 96.3 miles per hour on his average fastball velocity. Matchup against the Reds, not ideal. Ballpark, also not ideal. What I'm liking about Severino, and by the way, not somebody I would consider on like a single pitcher site, but for DraftKings purposes here, 7K. He's the 4th cheapest pitcher on the entire slate. He's only projected for 5% ownership. And outside of the runs he allowed for his game, like I really did think he pitched fairly well from looking at the numbers and also watching the game. So that's the contrarian option that I like getting to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if I want to go back to the well with Severino, but I certainly don't really have much interest in stacking the Reds. Although, that said, I probably should have more interest in both sides. Yeah, I completely get the Severino. He's cheap. I watched a bunch of his start last week also, or his first start, and he looked decent. He did get BABIP to death, so I don't hate the shout at all.
Yeah, so that's the guy right there that I am liking for contrarian purposes. And for people in the chat like Logan Grew saying Severino for real, Greg. Yeah, unfortunately for real. I'm just kind of looking at the data, making some inferences. If you're playing single entry, no way am I touching Severino. If you guys are only playing 1, 2 lineups, no, you're not playing him in that scenario. Here's where I am interested in playing Severino. Even if you're playing 20 lineups, I think Severino should be in 2 or 3 of them. You get like 10, 15% exposure to him. You're double, triple the field on him. That's all it takes to get overweight to the field. And then you look at some of these other punt options. I just think he's by far the most superior option. I'm way more interested in Severino and his upside than I am in Bailey Falter, Jake Irvin, or Carlos Carrasco, for instance.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't even think that's a question. So good call.
So I assume you like Nick Martinez a little bit based on what you had said before. He's pitching against another just shitty offense in the New York Mets. The Mets, the best thing that's happened to the Mets this season was when they had the 2 consecutive days where games got rained out and they got to have the 2 days in a row where they didn't lose a baseball game. That's been the high water mark of the Mets season to this point. So I could understand what it is that you might like about Nick Martinez. But from your standpoint, what is it that you're liking about Nick Martinez?
Not much, really, to be quite honest. The only reason I said that was because he's coming in with so much leverage in our tools that I was like, I didn't know you were going to answer that, like with the, like from you watching the start and et cetera. I thought you were just kind of basing it off the tools. And he looks like the most high-end leverage, or not high-end, the most highly leveraged pitcher on the slate. What's to like about him is that the Mets offense stinks. So there will be games where the Mets are good, but this offense, it's a continuation of last year. I mean, just not good. Martinez has strikeout upside. It's risky, but there's a lot of leverage there. I mean, he's got a 12% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 3% ownership, 4-1 there. I think he's another guy you can sprinkle in. And maybe instead of, a lot of people are going to play offenses in this game. Maybe you play a little bit of the pitching.
Yeah. And by the way, also, you were talking, or you and I have been talking about pitchers who went overseas, kind of rebuilt themselves up. Nick Martinez is one of those guys. He's had 2 fairly solid seasons in a row for the San Diego Padres coming into this year. 2022, 3.47 ERA, 3.83 expected ERA. 2023, 3.43 ERA, 3.98 expected ERA. So we have seen him put together a couple of strong seasons in a row since coming back from pitching overseas in Asia. So yeah, I think that Nick Martinez is somebody else at 3% ownership that you could certainly make a case for. I like Severino a little bit more just because I think if everything goes right for Severino this year, I think there's more upside there than if everything goes right for Nick Martinez. And at the beginning of the season, just pitchers could change so wildly. You don't know what pitchers are going to be from year to year for injury reasons, velocity changes, pitch mixes change. So like we see Logan Grew in chat saying he needs what I'm smoking because I'm advocating for Luis Severino as a contrarian play. And just because Severino was terrible last year, it doesn't mean he's going to be terrible. He could be terrible this year, but it doesn't mean he has to be. And it is something that there was a lot of positive signs from his first start. So I am willing to take chances on him in tournaments. And now if we get into the Discord questions here, Hey, I'm Drew said, who would we lean towards in cash games for the 1 p.m. slate? Yeah, so at pitcher, I'm going to say Ranger Suarez and Kenta Maeda. As far as an offense to build around for the early slate, I think you want to be looking at Orioles, Phillies. Yeah, like Orioles and Phillies bats probably. They're both the teams with the 2 highest top stack odds. Are also getting a good amount of salary savings, believe it or not, on Baltimore. They don't have like a crazy expensive offense, but a pitcher, I'm going to say Kenta Maeda and Ranger Suarez.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. 0 arguments from me there.
And then the next question we have here is Einsteinium. He says, is Matz really a better option than Blackburn and Martinez? No, I think they're pretty similar. Just Matz is way more popular.
Then, I thought you said Max and Matz. Okay.
Oh, no,
yeah,
Matz.
No. I'm with you.
Is Steven Matz really a better option than Blackburn and Martinez?
I don't think so. No,
he's just more popular.
Yep, same.
If we look at Steven Matz here, I'll pull up Matz's numbers now as well. There was a point in time where Steven Matz was a very highly regarded prospect in the Mets organization. Do you remember? It's so long ago to remember that this was a thing. Do you remember one of the reasons people really like Steven Matz is because he was going to be a pitcher that was able to hit as well? So you're going to get a lineup spot where it was like, hey, you're not totally punting when Steven Matz. It was like the dumbest thing ever. Like, I know that there were some people who enjoyed pitchers hitting. Like there was kind of a meme element to it, but how it was ever decided that half of baseball was going to have pitchers hit and how the other half of baseball was going to have a designated hitter. Like that was very, very odd that was something that we arrived at as a conclusion there. But Steven Matz has for the longest time been kind of like a middle of the road pitcher. He wasn't terrible last year, but he was certainly not great either. 3.86 ERA, 3.87 expected ERA. His strikeout rate just over 20%. And yeah, I mean, the matchup for him today against the Marlins is certainly a decent one, considering how poorly the Marlins have started the year. He's just so popular, though. And it's too much ownership going to Steven Matz for me. So Einsteinium, is Matz a better option than Blackburn and Martinez? No, to me, he's not. But what I really do prefer to do for getting off of Steven Matz, just find yourself a few $100 extra of salary to get up to, Kenta Maeda or to get up to Ranger Suarez, like we were saying before. Because these are guys who, at least as far as ownership is concerned, they're not that much more popular, Matts, but they're such better pitchers.
Completely agree.
And we've also got Eric Johnson in the chat saying it's a core slate. It is actually not a core slate. So, no, it is not. Anything else you want to add about pitchers?
No, I think that, yeah, I like the Severino call out as like a contrarian cheap pivot because he does have higher upside than anyone in that range. And then sounds like I like Ryan slightly more than you. Yamamoto, we're both intrigued with the upside, and then Suarez, Maeda, and Wells. I think we covered it all.
Yeah, and we've got a comment in the chat here from COVID Bryant II, who's saying he really could hit, though. Let me look up the numbers for Steven. I do remember that. I do know for sure relative to other pitchers, he was a good hitter. But let me look at his numbers here. I'll pull it up. Was he actually good? No, he wasn't. He had a 21 WRC plus for his career. So not actually good as a hitter, but relative to other pitchers, yeah, I'm sure that a 21 WRC plus is probably better than a lot of other pitchers, but still pretty shitty metrics there. Much better off with just the DH that's going out there and hitting. So let's go and start talking about the stacks. You guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget, if you want to sign up for any of the packages here at Stokastic, sign up using the links that we have below. Not only could they get you access to the different tools and data we have on the site, but also comes with access to our Discord channel. If you guys want to sign up for the data package, like if you're only looking for data, we've got a package for that. If you want the sims, you could sign up for that as well. You could build all your lineups on our site in the contest generator. You could also simulate the slate out. Or if you want the lineup generator package, the most affordable package we have on the site, that is less than $15. You could sign up for that. It's going to build lineups for you. It also includes ownership and player projection information. All these packages are going to include access to the Discord channel. By the way, COVID Bryant II is saying Bumgarner could hit. Okay, but we were talking about Steven Matz. But let me look up Bumgarner. I do remember
Bumgarner could definitely hit.
Yeah, I do remember Bumgarner was somebody who was also, at least relative to other pitchers.
It doesn't mean that these guys like actually could hit good. They just hit the occasional home runs usually.
I'm pulling up right now. What would you guess the WRC plus was for the career of Madison Bumgarner?
Would you say Matz's was?
21.
24.
44 for Madison Bumgarner.
Oh, okay. So significantly better.
Better, but still not a particularly great hitter. So also, if you're trying to look at like, what does this mean for a player's slash line? If people aren't familiar with WRC plus, the way WRC plus works, it's weighted runs created. And then the plus it's then weighted for things like ballparks, for strength of opponents. So average is 100. So if somebody's 44, it means that they create 44% of the runs that an average hitter would be worth there. And then if you look at what that means for the slash line for the career of Madison Bumgarner, 172 batting average, 232 on base percentage, 292 slugging. By the standards of a normal hitter, no, that's terrible. I'm trying to remember, was there, here's another one somebody brought up in the chat. Carlos Zambrano was a dude. That was another guy who I remember relative to other pitchers was considered a decent hitter. What do you think, though, Matt? Was he better or worse than the 44 WRC plus for the career of Madison Bumgarner?
I'm going to say slightly worse, but similar.
All right, pulling it up. Let's see. Madison Bumgarner was a 44 WRC plus. Carlos Zambrano, 57. So Carlos Zambrano, that is the high water mark for any pitcher that we've looked at so far. Now, if somebody goes and brings up Shohei Ohtani right now, that would be the right answer for the best hitting pitcher of all time, but kind of cheating a little bit there because he's such an outlier. But yeah, 57 WRC plus for Carlos Zambrano. Slash line of 238, 248, 388 there on Carlos.
I got two
Zambrano.
guys that I remember could hit. Zach Greinke and Mike Hampton.
Yeah, I was going to say Mike Hampton. Mike Hampton was one for sure. Let's see what he was. All right, Mike Hampton. And then I also remember no pitcher, and that wasn't just then, but now also, no pitcher ever wanted to sign with the Rockies because it meant you have to make half your starts at Coors Field. Do you remember one of the reasons that Mike Hampton signed there was because he got to hit as a pitcher there?
Yeah, that amongst the $100 million that they offered him.
Yeah, that as well, I'm sure was a pretty decent reason. But one of the reasons that he also was willing to pitch in Coors Field was because he was trying to get to hit there. Let's see. Batting stats. 67 WRC plus for Mike Hampton. All right, so he was 67% of a league average hitter. And keep in mind that when he played in Coors Field, it's weighted for ballpark. So he had some years where he hit pretty well at Coors Field, but it wasn't just for Coors Field. It was good in general. A lot of these Rockies hitters, while they have like decent counting stats, they'll still have advanced metrics that suggest they're terrible. But Yeah, Mike Hampton, 67 WRC plus, and had a few years in Colorado where he was considered an above average hitter. 2002, Mike Hampton, a 344 batting average, 354 on base, 516 slugging, 112 WRC plus. So Mike Hampton, he could swing a little bit of a bat there.
How about Greinke?
Yeah, I'll check him. Rye guy saying Michael Lorenzen could hit. Yeah, there was a point in time last year where Eric boldly proclaimed that Michael Lorenzen was the best hitting pitcher in baseball because he briefly forgot Shohei Ohtani existed. And yeah, that was one then where he got made fun of for that for about a year, which is about the standard. And I'm also going to, while I'm pulling this up, I'm going to refresh ownership for hitters just to make sure I've got all the fresh ownerships to look at when we're talking about the top stacks. So we'll be hitting on that next here. And in the interim, Zach Greinke. All right, let's see. What did Greinke do? Greinke as a batter. 59 WRC plus, also not bad. Not bad, 59 WRC plus. Well, Greinke was great back in the day. He could do a little bit of everything. Yeah. All right, so there was a fun little break from talking just about DFS, and we got Logan Grew. He can't get over the Luis Severino. He's like, Lorenzen is as good at hitting a baseball. Severino is bad at pitching. Severino was a Cy Young candidate for a long time.
Severino was a top 5 pitcher in baseball for a while.
Yeah, and then he got hurt. Came back last year. Wasn't as good. We'll see. We'll see. I think the most likely scenario is that he isn't going to be good this year. I'm not saying there's 100% chance he's going to be terrible, though, which seems to be what a lot of people think of him so far this year. Let's talk about stacks. We've got 4 teams that are picking up almost all the ownership on this slate, Matt. The Phillies are 12.4% owned as a team. The Orioles are 12.4% owned. The Mets are 11.3% owned. The Reds are 11.3% owned. Every other team's relatively contrarian. So with that in mind, let's start by talking about the popular teams. Do you like any of these super popular stacks for large field tournaments? And we'll also start to narrow it down to single entry afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I like them for sure. Just, a lot of them are getting love because they're in good spots. Most of the time, the teams getting love are getting love for a reason. In order, I think they all look good. None of them look like absolutely amazing to me. The Phillies look the best. They're the hardest to get to. So, you got to take that with know that going in, that if you stack the Phillies, you're going to have to probably get cheap with a pitcher. Baltimore, always in play. Today is no exception. Pretty easy to stack them. I think that they'll be the highest owned team when all is said and done on this slate just because of the price tags. The Mets, they weren't even that popular last night. So I think they'll get love here, but I don't think their ownership is a concern. And they are 3rd in the top stack tool. So as much as I hate to say it, because I know this lineup is not good, I like them today in this ballpark against Nick Martinez. I like them more than the Reds, who are getting the same exact ownership. We have the Mets slightly higher in our top stack tool. So for me, I think I like them in the exact order that they're listed. Baltimore, probably the easiest to get to, but they all look similar to me. None of them really stand out between those 4. How about you?
Yeah, I'm getting to way more Baltimore than any of these other teams. I'm way overweight to the field on them, and the hitters that are showing up individually the most for me in the Sims. And also, by the way, one other thing to add here about the Baltimore Orioles, basically top to the bottom of the lineup. The only hitter I don't have in double-digit percentage of lineups is Gunnar Henderson. Everybody else is getting to in a lot of my lineups here. But Jorge Mateo, he's in north of 20% of my lineup. Cedric Mullins, Adley Rutschman. Then the other hitters I have in here are in the teens, like Ryan Mountcastle, Austin Hayes, Anthony Santander. But the ones I'm getting to the most here, Jorge Mateo, Cedric Mullins, and Adley Rutschman, all players that are showing up in 20+% of my lineups. And it's kind of weird to me that we just don't have this Orioles team as being more expensive, because I really think this should be one of the most expensive offenses on most slates. And not this is really related to anything overall, but We also haven't had that many slates to roster the Orioles, just kind of a general observation, because they've had so many of these games that start at like 6:35 Eastern time where they just get chopped off of slates. So one of the only times we've been able to roster Baltimore so far, and they do have the third highest top value odds. It's where you have a team with the name value of Baltimore Orioles, second highest overall top stack odds for us, but also still having the third highest top value odds. And that's because some of those hitters, particularly at the end of the order, it's a deep batting order. There's guys that I'm willing to get to. Even Jorge Mateo is not the best hitter in the world, but he has some speed. He could steal bases because the lineup is so good. He's going to be in a lot of situations that could present him with run scoring opportunities as well as RBI opportunities. So Baltimore Orioles, that is my favorite overall offense on the slate.
I get it. For me, and I'm talking about this from a single entry, 3-entry max point of view. I think they will end up being the highest owned team on the slate. I said that when we were talking about them, and I don't think it's like overwhelming, but they're so easy to get to and they look so good. Why wouldn't they be? I mean, they look similar to Philly. Philly's a lot harder to get to. So I don't know. I think I'm worried about their ownership in, smaller fields, higher dollar type stuff. Maybe I'm off there. That's just how I'm reading the slate. But I completely get it. Like, I think that they should be the highest owned team on the slate. So maybe just playing them is the way to go.
Yeah, and we've got a question in the YouTube chat. We got a super chat from Kuiper K. He says, with the top stacks tool, is it based on 5-man, 4-man, 3-man, or a combination of all three? Yeah, so the way that the top stacks tool works is it's based on simulations, and then it's just which teams have the best percentage chance of being the highest scoring on the slate. That's what this metric is telling us. It's which team has the percentage chance of being the highest scoring team. Then you got the top value percentage, which is which team has the best percentage chance of being the best points per dollar value as far as the stacks are concerned. Then the ownership is just the aggregate ownership of the entire lineup. So the way that I'll kind of look at the top stack, top value, if I was just hand building lineups based on that, there's a couple of different factors, because sometimes I'm going to value the top value score higher than the top stack score. It's often going to depend on what pitchers are available, because this year it seems like all the top pitchers are getting hurt and we might not have them as options for very long. It seems to me I'm going to be prioritizing the top stack percentage more than the top value percentage that I would have in previous years, because often the reason that I'm looking at top value percentage is because there might be a lot of stud pitchers. I feel like, but this is where I need my pitcher ownership to be. Right? If you had a slate in the past where it's like, we've got Jacob deGrom going up against the Oakland A's. Well, I need to roster Jacob deGrom heavily on the slate. Therefore, I need cheap stacks to build around him as well. But on a slate like this, where we don't have the greatest pay up options at pitcher, I prioritize the top stack percentage more. But the thing with the Baltimore Orioles is not only do they have really high top stack odds, they also have really high top value odds. But for you, Matt, because I know that you're somebody who, just like myself, uses these tools quite a bit. And one thing that's good about tools is they don't only have to have one utility. People could use them in different ways. So like when I built my NBA lineups out this year, yeah, like you could just press generate contest. You could select build lineups. You could just favor the top 150 and upload them. And that's going to give you better results than if you were just traditionally building lineups on your own. But you could always use these tools to kind of manipulate it and change it to kind of bend it to see how you see fit. So when you're looking at the top stacks tool, what are you looking at to make decisions?
So certainly it's going to be slate dependent, because like what you said, when you've got elite pitching options going, a lot of times they will be the priorities, just because cheap stacks can always go off, even if they're less likely. So on most slates, the top stack percentage is more important to me than the top value percentage. But again, if you've got elite pitching options, that could completely change matters. Usually it's a combination of everything, though. A lot of times, team with the highest top value percentage is the team getting the most ownership because they're easy to fit. So it's slate dependent, but I generally agree with everything you said.
Yeah. So if we go ahead then and look at, and it's also, like I said, it's going to be a little bit different day to day, because there could be times where it's like, oh my God, this offense in this spot, it have such good top stack odds. Like, I have to prioritize this offense. And then I'll be like, all right, if this offense is expensive, but has such good top stack odds and really low ownership, then I'll say, all right, I'm going to build my lineups around this. And I have to look for pitchers that are going to make that fit in. But then it's vice versa too, if I feel like there's pitchers I really want. So a lot of times people will ask, do you start by building your lineups with pitchers or with hitters? The answer is kind of neither. It's going to depend on a day-to-day basis. Every slate is a little bit different for different things that we're looking at. And let's go back into Discord here, where Fantastico asked us, what are our stacks and pitchers to pivot off of the field for DKGPP? Yeah, so if I'm going to be different on the high end of pitcher, it's Yamamoto. If I'm going to be different on the low end of pitcher, that is going to be Severino for me. Matt's answer, well, also, if you're going to pivot on the high end, the only real answer is Yamamoto because he's the only contrarian high end pitcher. For you, Matt, if you were picking one lower end pitcher to pivot to, would it be Nick Martinez?
No, I think it's Severino. I'm going to ride with you on Severino. I liked your points. So I'll completely follow you there.
And then Fantastico wants to know which stacks do we like to pivot off of the field? So like I'd said there's 4 offenses that are picking up almost all the ownership on the slate. Phillies, Orioles, Mets, Reds, all of them are 11+% owned as a team. Other than that, the next most popular team, the Dodgers, are at 8.8%. And that's mostly due to pricing. It is just so difficult to build stacks of them because of what their salaries are. And then every other offense is 6% owned or lower. So of the offenses that are not double-digit owned, which one do you like getting to differentiate yourself? Something that we do talk about a decent amount here as well, Matt, is I think it's safe to assume any of these offenses that are not the Reds, the Mets, Orioles, or Phillies are going to be very contrarian in single entry.
Yeah, completely agree. So you kind of have your choice of the pickings there with the rest of them. And I got a team that I like. I hardly ever play them because usually they're really chalky. Today, they're going against the pitcher that isn't getting any love, and they're still not getting any love. And I hate saying this, but give me the Twins. When we were talking yesterday about pitchers that just absolutely suck, and you mentioned Urania, and I was like, yeah, he's one of the guys that I'll just stack against no matter what right now. Carrasco last year was that guy. Now, maybe he's a little bit better now back in Cleveland, not asked to do as much, but he stinks. And Minnesota's not getting love. So I like the Twins a lot here, way more than I usually do. Usually they're getting ownership, which is a big part of it.
I like the Twins. I think the Twins are certainly a good stack to be getting to. One thing also that I like to look at when people are talking about pivots, leverage in baseball, we're always trying to figure out who's the pitcher that has the most ownership, that's the most gettable. And that's something that I think has worked out really well for both of us, not just this year, Matt, but a couple of years we've been doing baseball shows together. We're always looking for these spots. So with that in mind, yesterday, who do we go to? We went to the Boston Red Sox, right? Boston Red Sox were our favorite contrarian stack on the slate, and they really came through. Boston was one of the best teams to roster yesterday. I think that could be the Miami Marlins today. If you think about what we had said about Steven Matz before, just how popular it is, we don't think the ownership is warranted. It's not to say that the Marlins have the highest odds being the top scoring team on the slate. We definitely don't think that that is the case at all. But if you look at the Marlins spot against Steven Matz, they're only project for 3% ownership. The only teams project for less ownership than the Marlins are the Cubs at 3.3%, the Nationals at 2.5%, Marlins 3.7% there. They're going to be playing in St. Louis, which is a more pitcher-friendly ballpark, but closer to neutral than what Miami is. Miami is a very pitcher-friendly ballpark. And then also, you just have a pitcher in Steven Matz who doesn't warrant ownership in the mid 20% range, which is what he's currently projected for. He's up to 23.7%. So whenever there is a pitcher that is very over-owned, in my opinion, I'm generally going to like stacking against them as long as it isn't an East starting pitcher, right? Like I don't want to be stacking against a chalk Jacob deGrom or a chalk Garrett Cole in most scenarios. Chalk Steven Matz, yeah, I'll take just about any offense against him. And the Marlins fit that bill. They're any offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I was stacking against Matz in spring training, so they were definitely a team, the Marlins, that is, I was looking hard at today. They're also not good, so there's that. But I had the last game they played against Lance Lynn, I stacked some Marlins. My best lineup was a Marlins stack. Bell homered, Berger homered twice. Even, better to see than that, they stole a few bases. So Matz is gettable on the base paths too, if I'm remembering that correctly. So yeah, I like Miami here. It's a good call.
Yeah, so Miami Marlins for me, as far as a low-owned offense is considered. Once again, there's a lot of offenses that are low-owned. We've only got 4 chalk pieces: Phillies, Orioles, Mets, Reds. Everything else kind of contrarian. And the only other team that's picking up some ownership is the Dodgers. Individually as one-offs, I'm going to like getting the Dodgers. It's going to be the same case for me just about every single slate. I like the
Yeah.
Dodgers as secondary stacks. I like them as one-offs. I like them as 2- and 3-man stacks. 5-man stacks, it's just so difficult to get to the Dodgers, no matter which, even if you're going with Kenta Maeda and Ranger Suarez as your pitchers, which I'll plug in right now to see what that leaves us as far as leftover salary. It's difficult. They're very expensive. It's hard to make 5-man stacks of them.
Oh yeah, you got to go like Severino, Martinez, something like that.
So let's see here. I'm going to plug this in. If we go Dodgers top hitters, we don't have their starting lineup out yet, but I'll make some like general assumptions, right? So if I put in Will Smith, Freddie Freeman, Mookie, we'll go Muncy, we'll go Shohei Ohtani. Where is Ohtani? Here's Ohtani. Okay, so I've got these hitters plugged in. And then if we go to, I'll even put Severino in a pitcher. I know that the majority of people in chat don't like him, but all right, we're going to put Severino in. And we'll put in Kenta Maeda. That leaves us $2,167 for the final 3 spots in the lineup. It's why it's so hard to make 5-man Dodger stacks.
Yeah.
Good as let me see who I'm getting to from the Dodgers as one-offs here. We'll sort by the Dodgers. Any other stacks that are pretty important to you today, Matt?
Not really, no.
Yeah, so I don't have really any Dodger stacks. I still have 36% of Mookie Betts. He's like he's my most rostered one-off.
That makes sense. I mean, he's elite. He's leading MLB in like every hitting category right now.
We've got Eric Johnson in chat asking, why do we not like the Cubs? Because I think Yamamoto is probably going to be a Cy Young candidate this year.
Yeah, same.
So, yeah, just main reason why. I think Yamamoto, very, very talented. Nobody's playing Yamamoto. He's very contrarian. So, I prefer the Yamamoto side than I do to the Cubs side of that game. Let me go and make sure there weren't any other questions in Discord. And there are not here. Jacob, could you do me a favor? Could you pull up the lineup generator? I'd like to start building some lineups in the lineup generator on the show. If you could pull that up, we'll go some DraftKings lineups for, actually, you know what I should check? I should have done this before. Does the lineup generator have the early or the late slate in it? Never mind. It has the late slate, not the early slate. All right. Abort mission. Abort mission. I've made an error in judgment here. Yeah, it's my bad, Jacob. I've led you astray. I've led you astray because we've got the late slate in for the MLB lineup generator, not the early slate. But we got a question here from Einstein. He wants to know, how do we feel about the Detroit and Oakland stacks? Are you considering playing either Detroit or Oakland on this slate, Matt?
Detroit looks decent. I respect Blackburn, but Detroit's actually coming in with a little bit of leverage, so I don't hate Detroit. And Oakland, man, as much as I hate to say it, they don't look awful either. Like, they're higher in our top stack tool than St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Miami. I'm not playing them, but if I were multi-entering, I would.
So the problem that I have with the Oakland A's, other than the fact that they're the Oakland A's, the main problem with the Oakland A's on this slate is, even if you roster them, like, what are you doing with the leftover salary? Because we've talked about how the pitching options at the high end are not the best today. So if you're building an Oakland stack, are you still leaving salary on the table, even if you go to Yamamoto and...
Well, I think you're probably playing the Dodgers with them as like a 3-man, or, you know.
Yeah, I guess that's true. All right, Oakland. All right, I'll just plug in the top 5 hitters in the Oakland rotation, batting order, I should say. Yeah, if you put in Noda, Geloff, Bleday, Seth Brown, Brett Rooker, so top 5 hitters in the Oakland order, and then also go to Joe Ryan and go to Yamamoto, you would then, almost be able to roster like the most expensive hitters at the leftover spots. Peter Viles in the chat, our friend Hubro, says salary doesn't matter in MLB. Yeah, in general, it doesn't. But for a team like the Oakland A's, the only reason you're rostering them is to save some salary for the most part. And I just find the salary savings to be pretty unnecessary. So I'm looking through my lineups. And out of my top 150 lineups, 3% of them are Oakland A's stacks. Are still underweight to the field. So not a team that I'm really seriously considering as far as the Detroit Tigers are concerned. I do think the Tigers warrant more consideration than the Oakland A's do. The Tigers might actually be decent this season.
I agree. I'm high on the Tigers, like very high on them this year. So 100% with you.
And Paul Blackburn is not a pitcher that I have ever really been particularly high on. Paul Blackburn is a guy who I think he had like one good season where he benefited from a lot of luck. Also, pitching in Oakland is something that has benefited him at points in time. And I know that he's still member of the team there. But let me see what we have for Paul Blackburn's overall numbers the last couple of years. So Paul Blackburn last year, 4.43 ERA, 4.42 expected ERA. The year before, 4.28 ERA. Also, he always gets hurt. He never pitches more than like 20 starts in a season. Year before that, then 5.87 ERA, 5.44 expected ERA. He's pretty consistently been like about a replacement level pitcher throughout his career. And I do think that there's more talent on the Detroit Tigers than there is on Paul Blackburn. If people are saying that Paul Blackburn is not terrible, I don't know. We got people in chat saying Luis Severino is terrible, but Paul Blackburn isn't. Paul Blackburn is a 4.8 ERA for his career. His expected ERA is pretty much in line with that. Yeah, I think he's been a pitcher in baseball for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is his 8th year in baseball, and he's worth a total of 3.4 wins above replacement for his career. Yeah, he's essentially a replacement level player. It's pretty terrible.
Pretty bad.
All right, so let's finish up with this before we close up the show for the day, Matt. And also, if you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Dong picks times. Who's going to homer today, Matt? Who are you going to pick to go yard for the early slate?
I am going to go with Edward Julian, leading off for Minnesota.
Let me go and check this here. Eric Johnson says Blackburn is a ground ball guy. Cool. He's also a guy who gives up a lot of runs, guys. That's you do it in multiple ways. You give up fly balls and give up runs. You give up ground balls and give up runs. That's Blackburn's way of giving up runs is through ground balls and getting hit hard. Also, if somebody doesn't generate a lot of strikeouts and walks a lot of hitters, which is kind of what Blackburn does, it's going to get you into trouble. Like, to be a really good starting pitcher, you have to get some semblance of strikeouts. Blackburn for his career is a 17.5% K rate. Am I a pussy if I pick Mookie Betts here? He's my most rostered hitter, but I feel like that's cheating.
Nah, I don't think it's... You did?
Right, yeah. Jacob jumped in pretty quick to tell me he was cheating, so I won't go with Mookie. All right, well, now I feel kind of not that this is the most likely one on the slate to call, but the individual hitter that I'm most overweight to is Kerry Carpenter, and he is going up against Paul Blackburn. So just to stick on me picking on Paul Blackburn, I don't think Kerry Carpenter actually does homer today, but I do think that he's more live to be in a winning lineup than what his ownership suggests. So only 6% projected ownership going to Kerry Carpenter, while he is in about a quarter of my lineups right now. So I'm well overweight to the field on him. That's going to be my dong pick for the early slate. Kerry Carpenter, if you guys haven't done yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Any final thoughts on the slate before we sign off here, Matt?
No, should be a fun one. And that's all I got.
All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Later on in the day, we're going to have NBA Live Before Lock, so I'll be on with EMAC from, 6 to 7? I think that's when the NBA slate starts. It is a rough one. It's only a 3-game basketball slate, so if you guys do have baseball questions for us and you're watching the show, yeah, we could field some baseball questions during that as well. So see you guys later. Have a great day. Peace out.